Hello there. My name is Matt Mankins. It's really good to be here in person. And today, I'm talking about web monetization and paywalls. But before we start, a show of hands, who here has visited a website with a paywall? All right, as expected. How about hands still up? Who's paid for that website? Anyone paying for? All right, thank you. I'm expecting that we've visited websites with web monetization. Yeah, okay, good. I'd be worried if not. But how about a website with a web monetization paywall? Oh no, is that a 0? Oh, we have a half. So half, that's pretty good. Actually, a little bit more than I expected. Why aren't there web monetization paywalls is sort of the question that I'm here to talk about. But I'll answer it right away. I think that it really comes down to two reasons. The first is interface, and the second is value. So with web monetization, it's really easy to build. Unfortunately, building a paywall user interface is not easy. And because it's not easy, the value for the dev effort required to build it is often more than you're going to make back. And so is it really worth the dev effort is like a big question. The other side of the value is what does the user get out of it? And if I'm a small website, is it really worth it for me? So with that as background, I really wanted to find a way to build a web monetization paywall. And originally, this talk was going to be about a user interface library to make it really easy to build paywalls with web monetization. But I decided to be a little bit ambitious and then go one step further, which was to take that library that I built before and build a product around it to have an idea for a paywall that might work for everyone. So it might be easy to implement. It might align with the value of the user and the developer that I mentioned before, and work with small sites as well as infrequent visitors. So these are things called non-fans, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the end result of all of this is that a demo site has been set up at fairpass.co, and it's something I call a paywall collective. This is not my first paywall. So I was actually part of the team that built the Wired, New Yorker, and Vanity Fair paywall. And as you might expect, I think that paywalls are great. They're a really good way to generate revenue as an alternative to ads. Everyone loves ads, right? It turns out that they're also a really good way to connect with super fans. So these are the people that are really willing to pay for your site again and again and again. They're also a good way to capture the value that you're leaving on the table. So with a lot of websites, you spend a lot of time making the content, but are not always able to get the money that is equivalent to the value that you create. And once you receive that value, you can then use that to create more content. Unfortunately, it's really only great as long as you're a really large brand. And so the reason that we have paywalls that are really functional on sites like The New Yorker is because it works there. On most of the other sites, paywalls are really kind of terrible. It's only a small percentage of users that are supporters that are really willing to pay for your site for a month. And paywalls, by their nature, are exclusionary. It's costing money to see content. As I mentioned before, they're sort of hard to implement. So there's development, there's marketing, there's telling the user what they get for a product. And so they end up only being viable for really large top sites. And so this is why we're here. I'm guessing you all know what web monetization is. It's super easy to implement. You put a meta tag on the site, and it immediately starts sending payments to the person's payment pointer. This is really magical because it works across all sites. It's automatic. There's no button to press. There's no interruption as you go to the website. It's the reason that I'm excited about web monetization. But web monetization has some problems, and I think that this is also an opportunity for web monetization. So the problems are really about value. What do I get for this paywall? How much will I make on the other side of it? What's in it for me to implement this? And why would I buy this are sort of the core questions that I think that we're struggling with and are the reasons that I built the Monet user experience library. For all of that, for this talk, I thought, OK, what can we do to sort of solve all of these problems and demo the Monet library at the same time? And so I realized that we had an opportunity to come up with a new paywall type. And this paywall, I call it a dynamic threshold. It's a really simple idea. It works like this. You set a desired percentage of paying users for traffic on any given site. If the traffic of paying users is above that threshold, then everyone gets the site for free. If it's under that threshold, then the paywall happens. So with this simple sort of feedback mechanism, we're causing more people to want to sign up for web monetization. And as we'll see in a minute, it's implemented in a fairly simple way. It's two things, the Monet library that I mentioned before, and I'll demo in a second, and an API script that goes onto the website. The interesting thing about this implementation is that it works across all websites, or it's designed to work across all websites. So a user starts understanding the value that they're getting over time. They might not understand why they would pay for a website initially for some small website, but as they see a consistent user interface across multiple different sites, that value is becoming more and more clear. And so on the left here, the unicorn is the unpaywalled site, and on the right is the troll, and that's the paywalled site. And the messaging is slightly different and something that gets tweaked over time. So who would use this? I just sort of picked this site as an example because I found Linus last week. Anyone know Linus? Recognize him? No. So Linus has a blog, or a blag. It's really cool content. It has a lot of really geeky music stuff on it, hardware tinkering, things like that. And Linus has a Patreon page as well. And Linus's Patreon page is supported by, last I checked, something like 10 people. And that's probably pretty good for Linus because he's probably in the long tail of websites. And for Linus to implement a paywall, it probably just wouldn't work. But then Linus did something really amazing. I don't know if anyone had a Commodore 64 or not, but it's the computer that I started programming on. And this is 2 Commodore 64s and an accordion body stitched together. And he basically created a musical instrument called the Commodorian. And the Commodorian plays music from the SID chip of the Commodores. And maybe this isn't like world-changing or whatever, but it certainly is interesting, and it certainly caused Linus's traffic to go up. And so in thinking about this, if Linus had the fair pass on his website, what would happen is that the value of his website would have gone from back in the long tail to increasing a little bit. And with the fair pass and the dynamic threshold, the percentage of paying users would go down below the threshold, and the paywall would then fire. And so by the paywall firing, more people will end up signing up for the website. And so this is kind of an interesting way to get new people onto the web monetization experience and get more people paying. So a rising tide really does lift all boats. Let me just take you through a little bit of what that might look like in person, if you can go to the computer. It's a little bit of a strange idea. Oh, you got it. OK. So what we have here is just an example. The threshold here is at 3%, and we see the paywall. And if we go to 12%, then we unlock that. It's really pretty simple, but also maybe takes a little explaining. If you have a fair pass, or fair pass is just another name for web monetization. If you have a fair pass, then you always see the website no matter what. And so in thinking about what that might look like, I sort of put together this demo that uses the Monet library a little bit more. So this is a modal that uses Monet of a closed paywalled site with no fair pass, and it has some really consistent messaging on it. If we open that up, we get a riser here, and this riser has some information about how to purchase and the fact that it's actually supported by other users. So there's a social element to this. That goes away when you navigate. If you're a FairPass member, you always get the content, and this uses a web component that just is a reminder that that's happening, so you want to renew your subscription. It's totally optional for you to implement that on your site. So that's basically the two different demos of FairPass. If we can go back to the slides. So this was all put together basically in a weekend to see if I could do it. And it's built on top of this library that I mentioned before called Monet. So the next part of this talk is really about that Monet and how it all ended up coming together. So Monet is two things, or three things. It's a play on money. And then it's an API and a pattern library. So Monet helps with common monetization tasks. And it does it by introducing a new JavaScript object called window.monet and a pattern library that sites can use to implement the consistent UI that I talked about and sort of demoed. If you think about trying to find out how to get money from a user, it's actually a really difficult problem because you want to get money any way you can. So in Uchi's Chi Money demo, you saw all the different options that exist. And a website wants to support them all. This is what a website wants. But a user has their own ideas on what they want. So a user only wants to support a few common modalities of payment. So they like web monetization. They like subscriptions. They hate ads. What Monet helps to do is to find out how to make money with viable monetization options. And figuring that out is actually the first step in finding a way to monetize your site, even for small sites. I won't go into all the details of this because it gets into the weeds, but there's a lot of sort of capabilities here. It's a plugin-based architecture, so you can have lots of different ways to augment the monetization capabilities. And it's all built on top of something like MIME types. So with MIME types, we have text/HTML as the MIME type for HTML pages. With this, we imagine a hierarchy of ads/behavioral, for example, or path/web monetization. And with this, we sort of build a language that we can start describing the monetization methods. This is all client-side, but there's also some work that I did in 2020 about passing this information back along to the server side via accept monetization headers. And so Monet sort of closes that loop. Finishing off, it's just a few common library patterns on Monet as a pattern library. So the first one that you're seeing here is actually the modal version. So it closes the screen. It causes the user interface to freeze and basically hides the content. It paywalls it. There are, however, a lot more touch points that you want to interact with the user in their journey across not only your site, but other sites, so that the user starts understanding the value that web monetization and things like FairPass would have. And so this is an interface called a riser. That's something that rises up from the bottom and it goes away. It's an opportunity for you to talk a little bit more about the product in a kind of non-intrusive way. It's more of an art than a science, and so we're imagining that the library expands itself over time. It's open source, so please contribute. In summary, if you ever wanted to implement something like this, the implementation is fairly easy. You take a script tag, you drop it onto the page, and that will give you some web components. you can then customize those web components with some parameters and use a tool that we've built called Storybook that helps you fill out those parameters to be able to see what you're getting ahead of time. And with that, that is Monet and a really quick demo of FairPass. So thank you much. Do we have time for questions or no?
Yeah, we have time for questions. Anyone wants anyone has any questions for Matt? Come on, Travis, you know you want to.
Hey, Matt, this is really interesting. We should totally meet and talk about stuff.
Yeah.
I also saw on your website you have set your monetization preferences. You have subscription, web monetization, and ads. Can you talk more about the subscription option there? I know it's not quite related to this, but I'm kind of curious how that fits in.
So that website happened when I was a Mozilla fellow studying alternative business models for the web and sort of was trying to look at the problem in general. And basically, it's about a hierarchy of payment methods. And it really is just the word subscription, as if what the New Yorker does right now is a subscription model. So you buy once, and you get a monthly reoccurring revenue charge. So like Netflix is a subscription. Whereas web monetization, I find it to be more broad. Even though it might be a subscription, it actually works across all sites. And so it's not just about the vertical site that you're on, not just about the New Yorker, but across globally.
With web monetization, what would you say is the most limiting thing about it? Do you prefer the streaming payments, or would large or small micropayments be better? If you had to think of one thing, what would be something you'd change about it?
Good question. Web monetization, I think, is really great because it starts us down the path of aligning value with a dollar amount that is likely less than a penny. The alternative to that is advertising, which is also a micropayment system. We just don't think of it that way. I think for me to change one thing about web monetization, it would just be about interface, and that's kind of what I tried to allude to here, is that it's not about the technology, it's about having a conversation with users about support and making web monetization an aid there.